Welcome back everyone to another video on the channel, and in today's video we're going to be looking at a class in Pirate101 known as Swashbuckler. So Swashbucklers, they're a speedy class. They like to get in and get out while doing heavy damage and dodging attacks in return. They're a melee class and they use agility. Pirate101 has three main stats: agility, will, and strength, each pertaining to a specific class. Swashbucklers use agility, and for their weapons they prefer to use a weapon in each hand, for example a dagger. Today's video will be a short guide on Swashbuckler basics. I will explain each power and talent that they get and what they do. I'll give you insights on what you should invest your practice points into other classes. I will explain the starter choices during character creation that you should make for a Swashbuckler, and I will also be showing the best gear at max level and where you can get them. Do note that this is not a PvP guide. This is purely PvE right now, and it's for those who wish to learn Swashbuckler better and for those who are getting into the class for the first time. So, with all that said and done, let's dive into the class of Swashbuckler. So first up, we're going to be talking about the powers that they get. Swashbucklers get a lot of powers, and they mostly focus around dealing damage to the enemy either directly or over time. They can also protect themselves, buff their own critical chance, or even debuff enemies. Here on the screen currently, I have each Swashbuckler power that you naturally learn for free as you're a part of the class. All up to number 16 here. This is the last power. Well, it's not the last power that you learn, but all these powers before it are what you actually learn in class. Everything else after this is just from gear and such. So after you make a Swashbuckler and you enter the game for the first time, the power that you learn is Sneak Attack. It's basically just a more powerful hit than your own basic hits. It does double the damage of your weapon power, and it's a pretty good hit for beginners. Next up is the second tier of that attack, which is called Backstab. It essentially does the same damage as Sneak Attack, but it applies bleeding to the opponent for 2 rounds. For the third tier of the attack, which is the final tier, it's called Assassin's Strike, which does 3 times your weapon power, and it's insane damage. The bleeding also gets doubled from the last tier, and it's the strongest melee hit in the game. Next up, Swashbucklers learn Walk in Shadows, which pertains to their class identity, which is hiding in the shadows and then doing extra damage while coming out of it for a sneak attack. Walk in Shadows, it hides you for 3 turns, but whenever you attack while hidden, you can only do this once by the way, that attack gets double damage. When targeted, you cannot be hit by an opponent with a single attack. It has to be an AoE or a area of effect attack in order for it to affect you. Next up, we have the second tier of this ability, which is called Walk in Darkness. Essentially, it's the same thing except it lasts for 5 turns as opposed to 3 turns. The third and final tier of the hide abilities, which is Black Fog. Essentially, it's an AoE type of hide for your team, but they have to be adjacently around your pirate. It doesn't affect the entire team no matter the distance, they have to be adjacent. Next up is Gallant Defense. Basically, reading it, you might not get what it means or how it's activated. What it does is it gives you the Gallant Defense talent, which means allies adjacent to you get guarded, and allies adjacent to you cannot be affected by enemy hits. Say an enemy were to go hit a companion next to you but they're guarded, they'll be forced to hit you instead. You start intercepting the attacks they were supposed to do to your companions, and you either dodge it, you take the damage, you start going crazy. Next up is Shadow Dance. Shadow Dance basically increases your own critical rating for 10 turns by 10%. Grand Shadow Dance is essentially the same thing except it's 15% but for 5 turns instead of 10 turns. Swashbucklers also learn a ranged attack called Hurl Knife. It basically does damage to a limited range to a certain enemy, but it debuffs their movement by 50%, so they can't move across the map as far as they normally can. Hurl Blades is the AoE version of Hurl Knives. It does a tiny bit more damage, but it reduces the enemy movement by 1 instead of half, so it can be good or bad, but it's an AoE attack, so of course it has to have some sort of cap to it. Dance of Steel. One of Swashbuckler's first attacks that they get early level that is AoE. Essentially what it does is it can hit up to 8 enemies at once if you're surrounded, all doing the same amount of damage. Enemies cannot react to it, so means First Strike, Vengeance Strike, or any other passive talents cannot be activated by this Dance of Steel. It's mostly meant for chip damage and area damage. It's best if you can get multiple enemies into it, so that way you can maximize its damage potential. Gambit of Steel is like Dance of Steel, the same thing, except targets can react. So if the target has First Strike, they will strike before you start using this ability. Now we are on to Swashbuckler's last tier of abilities, which is the poisons. The first one you learn early level is Assassin's Mist. It does damage for 3 turns to up to 8 enemies if you're surrounded. Like Dance of Steel, it's good if you can get this onto a group of enemies so you can maximize its damage potential. Next we have Assassin's Gloom. Basically the same thing as Assassin's Mist, but it does it for 5 turns instead. On the last tier of this ability, it's Assassin's Shroud. It does the same thing as the previous 2 tiers for 5 turns, except this time, the ones that are poisoned cannot be affected by heals. As you can see here, they get Curse or no healing. Next up, let's move on to the talents of a Swashbuckler that you learn for free. Swashbucklers learn Light Armor for free. It's self-explanatory, you can use Light Armor. Swashbucklers also learn Jump, which means they can jump over holes in the battle board, or over obstacles, or over stone blocks, barrels, anything really. But it does have its limits. Swashbuckler also learns 2 tiers of Accurate, which gives them 5 Accurate total at max level. Swashbucklers are the only class able to learn Rough 3, which gives them a total of 7 extra weapon power. Swashbucklers are also the only class to learn 3 tiers of Dodgy, which gives them a total of 10 dodge at max level. Swashbucklers learn Stabby Weapons, which adds 20 extra damage to your weapon if it's a stabby weapon. Swashbucklers also learn Pirate 3, the 3 tiers of it. It's only good on enemy ships. Personally, I never really bother with this since I prefer to battle on land than on enemy ships. Swashbucklers are the only class that are able to learn Fast 3, the 3 tiers of it, which means they have the most movement speed or movement tiles out of all the classes. Swashbucklers also learn Peaceful 3, which means any hit, move, or heal you do has a minus 40% chance to increase aggro on AI enemies. Next up, we have one of Swashbuckler's first passive talents in combat, First Strike. You learn First Strike at level 15, and once per turn it strikes before melee attackers. It's pretty simple. First Strike 2 does the same thing, except up to 3 times a turn. First Strike 3 does the same thing as before, but this time, it spots sneak attacks, which means if an enemy is hiding and they try to attack you, you automatically remove their hide due to First Strike, and you also do 25% extra damage to that same enemy. Swashbucklers are also the only class to learn Alert 1 and Alert 2, which means they may take 50% less damage from traps or no damage at all. Riposte. Remember when I said Swashbucklers would dodge enemy attacks and would punish them? This is their Punisher move right here. You learn Riposte as early as level 37, and once per turn, if a melee enemy tries to hit you but they miss, you counterattack them with Riposte, which has a higher damage roll than your basic attack. Riposte 2 does the same thing, except up to 3 times a turn. Riposte 3, however, can be a game changer, because every time you dodge and trigger Riposte, you get 15 extra dodge for that turn. Essentially meaning if you were to dodge and trigger Riposte 3 different times, in that one turn you can get a max of 45 dodge. Those are all the talents that Swashbucklers learn for free. Now let's move on to talents that you should learn with your practice points. As a Swashbuckler running the standard melee build, I highly recommend learning these 3 talents: Spooky 2, Elusive 2, and Relentless 1. Now, in like any other game, there's a certain skill tree you have to learn before you're able to learn the actual ability or spell that you want. In this case, you want to learn Spooky 2, but there are prerequisites to what you must learn beforehand. In order to learn Spooky 2, you need to learn Resistant 1, Staffy Weapons 1, Staffy Weapons 2, along with Spooky 1, and Spooky 2. What Spooky does is it essentially increases how powerful your healing are, how powerful your poisons are, and how powerful your bleedings are. So if you wish to maximize your damage output, Spooky 2 is a must-have. Elusive 2. Out of the 3 talents that I showed you, the one that's definitely most required and the one that you should try to get to first is Elusive 2. What Elusive 2 does is when you're below half health, you get 25% extra dodge and 2 movement. As swashbucklers have to dodge in order to pace with their squishiness, this move is a must-have, especially below half health, especially when you have riposte, so that you can punish enemies even more. In order to learn Elusive 2, you need to learn Resistant 1, Slashy Weapons 2, and Tough 2, which allows you to learn Elusive 1 and Elusive 2. For the last ability, which is Relentless, it basically is another chance to get a hit before your turn ends. It only has a 35% chance of triggering though, so don't always expect it, but it's always good to have with how much you hit as a swashbuckler. You learn Relentless from a secret trainer in an area you discover later on, but in order to learn Relentless, you also need to learn the following: Big Choppy Weapons, Armored 1, and Smashy Weapons 2. If you were to learn all of these talents, you would need about 17 practice points. But however, at max level, you get 21 total practice points from leveling up and from doing certain Z quests, which awards you with practice points. So this means that you have 4 practice points left over, but there are also some powers which I highly suggest that you should learn as a swashbuckler. First up is Ruse. It's essentially your first and only healing ability that you're able to learn for like almost free. You just need 2 training points. But you're asking, why do I need 2 training points? There's only 1 ability. Well, in order to learn Ruse, you also need to learn Gunnery from the Privateer trainer. You also should learn Mighty Charge. It's weaker than your other hits, but it hits twice, and it also has double movement range, as you can see here. What it means is, say you're able to move 5 tiles on a battle board. With this power, you're able to move up to 10 tiles on the battle board. So I went over all the powers and talents that swashbucklers get, as well as all the talents that I think you should learn from other trainers. Now let's get into what talents you should pick when you're making a character in character creation. So when making your first character, you have to make 3 decisions for your character. The first decision determines what companion you get at a certain point in the story. Now it's entirely preference. You can go ahead and research what each one gives you and what each companion does and has, and then pick which one you think suits you best. But let's go over what each option gives for a companion. Storm gives you a swashbuckler rat, Squid Attack gives you a buccaneer crab, Mutiny gives you a buccaneer zombie, Shipwrecked gives you a privateer dog, Armada gives you a buccaneer guinea pig. Now the best 3 that I think is for swashbucklers are the following: Storm, Squid Attack, and Mutiny, which is swashbuckler rat, buccaneer crab, buccaneer zombie. I'll be going over why I think these 3 are the best in another video, but personally I just think that these 3 companions that you get from these 3 options synergize really well with the swashbuckler playstyle. The next decision that you have to make is one that has more importance. This decision determines what stat bonus that you get. Keen Eyes gives you 5 extra accuracy, Born Warrior gives you 5 extra damage, Born Sneak gives you 5 extra dodge, Naturally Tough gives you 5% health, which scales as you level up, Natural Spooky gives you 5% extra spooky, which scales as you level up. Now all of these are equally good. Maybe for Keen Eyes, swashbucklers, you don't want to miss a melee hit with them. Born Warrior, you want to do extra damage each hit you throw out. Born Sneak, swashbuckler's big thing, sneaking and dodging. 5 extra dodge will always help. Naturally Tough, swashbucklers get really low health, they're really squishy if they get hit a lot. The extra health can come in handy. Naturally Spooky, a lot of your abilities get buffed by spooky and spell power. But the 3 that I think are the best for swashbuckler are Naturally Spooky, Naturally Tough, and Born Sneak. Again, this is entirely preference, it's all up to you and your playstyle, but personally I think that those 3 are the best for swashbuckler, so that way you can maximize your damage output while also keeping your survivability in check and good. So unlike gear in other games, gear in Pirate101 is super customizable. Powers are also known as a kit. So basically whatever your kit is lacking, maybe it's heals, hits, defensive options, your gear can make up for it. Personally, I have what I think is the best and what other people think is the best loadout for gear for swashbuckler. For the hat, you have Corrupted Shinobi's Haratare, which comes from the Tower of Mumachu, gives a hide and an Assassin's Strike. Once again, Assassin's Strike is the strongest melee hit in the game in terms of damage. Next up is Swashbuckler's outfit. Now, outfits for swashbucklers are super customizable, they can be anything you want. They can give a card, they can give stats, it's really your preference. Personally, I like having an extra heal on me at all times, so I prefer to use the Zayat jacket from the bazaar, which gives a heal. Shoes of Faunus. Now these boots are a must-have for swashbucklers. Valor's Fortress is such a nice card for swashbucklers since they're so squishy. Valor's armor is a power that is privateer based, but swashbucklers can also get it from their gear. Essentially, you can place it on yourself or an ally, and any damage that they take gets halved. The boots also give really nice stats, weapon power and dodge, swashbuckler's two main stats. Next up is the weapon. For a standard swashbuckler melee build, this, in my opinion, is the best weapon to have. It's slashy stabby, so you get bonuses from your stabby weapons talent and your slashy weapons talent. The cards that they give are also really good because Haywire Strike, it can do more damage than an Assassin Strike, which is basically the strongest melee hit in the game, or it can remove buffs, stun enemies, anything really. You can also choose to use the boarding knives from the Crown Shop, which gives a bit more damage, but also gives an Assassin Strike if you want to have an extra one. It's all up to you, it's not necessary, it's not going to make that big of a difference. For the eye patch, what I think is the best is the Selpius Talisman. Like the boots, it gives a Valor Fortress, and it also gives agility and weapon power, which means your attack is going to be stronger, your critical chance is going to be a tiny bit higher. You can also choose to use the patch of Serpentine Assault. Basically, it gives Sky Spirit, which is a musketeer ability that swashbucklers can get. Swashbucklers and musketeers use agility on the team. So with this power, you can double your agility by 100% for 3 turns for the entire team. More agility means more damage, more critical chance, and less chance of an agility based enemy criticaling on you. For the totem, the Ornament of Mu Manchu, which comes from the Tower of Mu Manchu, is the best. I also forgot to say that the Shoes of Faunus, the Selpius Talisman, and Patch of Serpentine Assault, all 3 of these pieces of gear come from the same boss in Aquila, known as Xena. I highly recommend farming Xena because she dropped gear for other classes. Next up is the amulet. Just like Swashbuckler's outfit, the amulet's also very customizable. You can choose to use an amulet that gives cards or an amulet that gives stats. Swashbucklers don't really have great amulets that give great cards, so I prefer to go with the stats amulet. In this case, I like to go with the Obsidian Brass Medallion, which comes from an Obsidian key boss for max levels, known as Obsidian Brass. Swashbucklers can also use the Tower of Mu Manchu amulet, which gives a hide and a poison. There's also Sprocket Key, which if you're going into PvP Swashbucklers, this is a must-have. You must get this if you're going to do PvP, but this is not a PvP oriented video. For the ring, you want to have the Brain Thief Circle, Assassin's Gloom, and Assassin's Strike. Once again, Assassin's Strike is the best melee hit in the game in terms of damage. This also comes from the Tower of Mu Manchu. And for the pet. For a pet, you definitely need a pet that gives Relentless and Elusive. Those are 2 must-haves on Swashbuckler. Everything else can be entirely up to preference. I'll leave that up to you, but Relentless and Elusive are a must-have. So guys, that's it pretty much for this short, comprehensive Swashbuckler guide. I think I touched on all the basics. I know Swashbucklers have companions. I will touch on them in another video, each in their own respective individual video. So with this guide, I hope you're able to understand Swashbucklers better and how they play, as well as maybe sway you into making one, or if you're having doubts about making a Swashbuckler, maybe this video can help convince you to make one. This is the first time I've done a guide like this, especially in a verbal form. Let me know how I did, give me some suggestions, give me some tips, comments, feedback. I will read all of them. I love reading them. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope this video helps you guys, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I plan to make a video like this for each class in the future, as well as companions, gear, farming spots, everything really. So look forward to it. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.